Hello and welcome back to the channel. I realized really quickly that I needed to up my game in terms of computer system so that I can create videos and edit them, and it wouldn't take 3 days. So I went out and I bought some components. Just recently I bought some other components for my computer and I upgraded it slightly, but I realized that wasn't enough. So I went ahead and I bought along with a graphics card and a new power supply, I bought a solid state drive to handle the files a little faster. And I also went and bought a new CPU with a cooling fan and a motherboard. So basically, I'm building a brand new computer from the ground up. I've never done it starting from scratch like that. I even bought a new tower. And again, I've never really put one together from the ground up. I have upgraded some components, I've upgraded RAM and things like that, but in terms of putting the whole thing together from scratch, never even attempted it. So hopefully this goes well, and I'm going to take you guys along for the ride just to show you that even with very limited experience or know-how, this is possible. I did this. I'm not a computer guy. I'm not really I wouldn't call myself a tech person. So here we go. Hit the like button if you like it, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy the video. Okay, this is the tower box that you see on the screen. It's a NZXT H510. Just unpackaging everything. It's a really nice case. It's got a tempered glass side. Comes with two fans, two system fans in there. The motherboard is a B450 Tomahawk Max. Again, I know nothing about computers. I went down to my local Micro Center. This is what the guy recommended. Paired it up with this processor. It's the Ryzen 7 2700X. It's not the latest, but for what I'm looking to do, he said it was more than enough. It's got a nice cooling fan. A lot of copper, man, that thing is heavy. And it comes with the thermal paste pre-applied to the bottom of the heatsink. So here I'm going to show you how I position the processor and put it into the motherboard. The processor's got these little pins on the underside of it, and it's also got an arrow that lines up with an arrow on the motherboard, so you really can't put it in wrong. I'm just pointing to the arrows there. Just lift a little lever, insert. I just gently put it in there and it kind of fell into place, and then I just closed the lever. Okay, so now to install the heatsink, you've got to line it up. It's got these brackets on the motherboard with hooks on them, and those hooks go into the metal straps that are coming out of the side that I'm pointing to there, and there you'll see it right there. So that strap with the hole in it goes into the hook. And there's really only one way you can do this, so it's not like you can hook it onto the wrong thing. Once you've got it hooked on like that, then you just turn it and hook on the other side. It's got a little like a lever on top of that strap, so that once you hook it, you've got to click that thing down. Now, I was being too gentle and I wasn't sure if it was tight enough, and it wasn't. So later on, I called the Micro Center and I explained to the guy, and he told me you've got to force it over until it really snaps into place, and then it's solid. And that's what I did. See right there, I'm fumbling with it. I didn't want to force it because I didn't know if I was going to break anything. And that's why it's good to be cautious. So I was cautious. I made a phone call. He explained to me what I had to do. Took care of it. Now just connect the wire. Every connection on the motherboard is labeled. It says fan, fan 1, CPU fan, system fan. So I just plugged it into the slot that said CPU fan. And here I am installing the RAM memory. Now, I installed this incorrectly. And I find out later and I fix it. Because I go back and I check everything I'm not sure about. There's 4 slots for the memory, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you're only using 2, you have to install it into slot 2 and 4. And just getting the screws and everything organized. So once everything is on the motherboard and I can handle it, I just grab it by the heatsink and I'm positioning it to get it into place. And here I am explaining that I had to move those memory into the second slot and the 4th slot. Again, not a big deal, just a little research. And by the way, I was putting all this together without really reading any kind of documentation, except for like when I was looking up the CPU and how to position it. So I just snapped in the plate that covers all the attachment points, all the ports that stick out of the motherboard, and that goes on the back of your computer. Those are labeled to let you know what you're plugging into where. And then it's just a matter of positioning the motherboard over the screw holes. There's 9 screws, or 9 screw holes I should say. One of them is not for a screw, it's for a pin that sticks up out of the case. And once you line up that hole with the pin, it drops into it, and then all the other holes are in position to get screwed down. And then here I am just screwing everything down. And this, believe it or not, is just a lot of this kind of work. Just repetitive, screws and straps and wires and things like that. How to put everything together or where to put everything was not that difficult, because like I said, everything is labeled and these connections are designed in such a way that they can only fit where they belong. So, if you have a 8-pin connector and there's only one 8-pin slot, that's where it's going. These are just the USB ports, the microphone port, and the power button. Now, each one of those has its own cable, and here they are. And these are what needs to get plugged to the motherboard. Now, if you'll see in a second, that's where I connected the fans. So the fans are already connected. And again, these are connected into slots that are labeled fan. This guy here, I don't remember what it was for, but if you look at the connector, you'll see that however many pins it's got a blank in the lower right hand corner. That blank lines up with another blank on the motherboard where it's going to be connected, and there's only one of that kind. So it could only go into that slot. I found that extremely useful. They designed and built these things to be put together by people like me and you who don't do this on a daily basis. This is another connector. I think this was the USB connector. And that just clicks into place. Again, only fits into one location that is labeled. And it's hard to see, I guess, on the video, but there are labels next to each one of these that tells you, maybe even abbreviated, but it tells you what it's for. And in the motherboard manual, it tells you where everything goes. So once everything's connected from the front panel like that, then I can go ahead and start installing the the other components that I have to add still. It's a clear shot of where all those front panel connectors, they're all along the bottom of the motherboard, which is nice because then you don't have the cables going all over the place. And this is now me taking apart the old system so that I can grab the components I need. I'm going to need to take out the power supply, and I'm going to need to pull out the graphics processor that I put in there. And those things I just recently purchased, and I put them in there maybe a week or two ago. And one thing I am planning on doing is upgrading that graphics processor. I got a RX 570, and I think I'm going to upgrade it because I'm editing using DaVinci Resolve, and it uses a lot of GPU capacity. So I think I'm at like the bottom of where I should be in terms of like minimum requirements. And so I'm going to upgrade it just to make that a little smoother, because I do see some choppiness when I'm editing. And I've checked the settings, and I think it's just the processor is not doing it. I'm removing the solid state drive that I also just recently got. Okay, so now we're going to put all of those components back into the new case. And I'm going to start with the power supply. Now this power supply is going to mount to the bottom, which is fine. Again, I just got to line up the holes so I can drop the screws in there. Everything lines up, and it kind of like just fits exactly where it needs to be. Once it slides in, it almost clicks in. It just kind of like drops into its place. And then I can put all the screws in there and then run the cables to the front. Now, anybody who wants to try a project like this, I would totally encourage them. I don't think it's something that's beyond many people. I think, if you may run into certain things. There are limits, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later on in terms of like what you need to do to prepare your system, and even that was not as difficult as I thought it was. So here we've run the cables from the processor, here we've run the cables from the power supply to the front. I plugged in, there's two cables. There's one really big one, the long one on the right hand side, and then that yellow one that goes up to the top. So both of those click into their space, and again, there's only one place for them. Here I am putting in the graphics card. That's just going to slide in, and then you click it into place. Once the card goes into its slot, there's a little lever there, a little mechanism that clicks it into place, and it locks it in. And once it's locked in, then you have to put the screws on the back there, and that really holds it in. These graphics cards are big, and they need some reinforcement so that they don't move or put a lot of stress on the slot that you're putting them into on the motherboard. So once that's all done and the cables from the power supply are connected, now there's another cable from the power supply that goes to the graphics card, and that powers the graphics card. That's not the case on all graphics cards. Some of the less powerful ones are powered right from the motherboard, but this one here is powered from the power supply. Once that clicks into place, it's set. Okay, now here we're going to start to install the the solid state drive, the hard drive, I have it upside down here, and I'm going to flip it over. But I also have to remove those silver brackets. Those came off the old computer, and I didn't realize that I didn't need them for this one, so I left them on. But I'm going to take them off, and now that drive is in another bracket, that big black wide bracket. That's a bracket I had to buy separately because the drive is so narrow it wouldn't fit into any of the computer openings. So again, the person at the store told me all these solid state drives are all like 2.5 inch, and all of the brackets inside the computers are 3.5 inch. So I had to get this bracket. Now it goes into a small cage that's in there, and I'm going to have to flip the computer over to remove that cage so then I can screw that bracket into it from the sides. Otherwise there's no way to get my hands in there. So I'm going to remove that cage, just take out the 4 screws underneath the computer. There it is. And then I'm just going to screw that thing in so that it stays in tight, and then just reinstall. Now once this is done, I can start connecting the SATA cable that's going to go to the motherboard from the hard drive. And then there's another cable that goes from the power supply to the hard drive. So those 2 cables get installed, and here I am again just showing how each cable has a cutout. It's like an L-shaped cutout on the end so that it can only fit one way onto the connection. And these things go in smooth. You don't have to force them. So if you feel like you have to force something, you're probably not putting it in correctly. Run the cable to the front. This one here is the cable from the power supply. Again, it has that same cutout. It's shaped the same, and it goes in to the hard drive in the same manner. You just line up the pins and the L-shaped cutout, and it clicks right in. I'm just going to tuck these away. I later went back and kind of managed these cables a little bit neater. I just kind of zip tied them together so that they all form like one cable going to the front. Now I just have to plug this in to the right connector. There's actually 4 or 6 connectors of this type on this motherboard, and I honestly just picked whichever one I felt like. I picked the closest one, and I just plugged it in there. So this is the moment of truth. Turn it on for the first time. I see things spinning, so that's good. I'm like, okay, at least something's happening. Now, I'm powering it up, and I have to be honest, this is actually the second time that I turned it on, because the first time I was so anxious and so excited that I repositioned the camera and I forgot to hit record. So this is actually the second time. The first time it happened, the BIOS screen came up and it asked me if I wanted to do a custom setup or default. And I just chose default. It said press F2, I pressed F2, and it came right up. No problems at all. Windows came up without a hitch. Now, again, I did do some research on this. I spoke with someone at Microsoft. Excuse me. I spoke with someone at Microsoft a day before, and I asked if I would have any problems. I told them what I was changing, what components I had. The guy told me you should not have any problems as long as your current system is updated. So he helped me, he walked me through a process of updating my drivers and my BIOS for the system that I had. I shut it down. I was on the phone with him for about 25-30 minutes. He helped me. He walked me through everything. I said, okay, now tomorrow when I do this upgrade, if I have any problems, should I call you? And he said, sure, absolutely, call Microsoft. He thought, if anything, I might have a problem activating Windows, and I did not. So I didn't need to call, and everything turned on and works perfect. The only thing that I can't get to come off of there, and I may have to call them and find out what it is. My last computer was a Dell, and everything that comes up, all the screens that pop up, I'm still getting notifications that I can update certain programs on my Dell, and I don't have a Dell anymore. So I guess that's kind of just some software that was pre-installed, and I need to figure out how to get rid of that. I might have to call Microsoft and see if they can walk me through maybe just reinstalling Windows without any of that stuff. And I hope this video inspires somebody or gives somebody confidence that they can do it too. There's a lot of resources out there. Obviously, YouTube is a great resource. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and people will give it to you. Call people when you need to. Just like I called Microsoft, told them what I was doing, and they were more than happy to help me. The guys at the store that I went to, they were more than happy to point me in the right direction. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Guys, nothing in this video was sponsored. I have no affiliation with any of these products or their companies. I chose these products simply on the recommendation of the retail person who helped me. And that was it. I'll see you next time.